Morning, everybody, and Happy New Year. Well, this morning I've got a message that I got yesterday from Jesus, and it's about how we can grow spiritually over this coming year. And what better New Year's resolution, so to speak, or New Year's commitment could there be than growing spiritually and taking advice, of course, from Jesus himself, who knows best. So here goes. My children, how I desire you now to grow in your hearts after the Christmas season and to become stronger and more present in your lives. For this to happen, my children, you must pray and you must surrender your lives and decisions to me each day. Consider, my children, a newborn baby, and consider the things that you must do in order for the baby to grow healthy and strong. The baby needs regular feeding and much love and nurturing, and you will need to make many adjustments to your lives for the baby's sake. You may need to give up working for a period and change your social life, and you may not be able to afford certain things as you now have many new expenses relating to your new child. Nonetheless, you will make these changes out of love, and the more you love your child, the less these changes will seem like sacrifices. My children, it is no different with your spiritual lives. In order for me to grow in your hearts, you need to pray much, pray regularly, as prayer is the food for your spiritual soul. Along with prayer, you must learn to spend time with me and to talk to me and nurture your growing spiritual soul. This, my children, will require sacrifices. Sacrifices of your time, of your activities, and especially of your social lives. Again, the more that you love me, the easier this will become, because you will see that nothing in your physical world comes close to the value of the eternal and spiritual graces that you may obtain for yourselves through prayer. Yet, my children, many of you will not make these sacrifices and will not change your lives in the way necessary for your spiritual growth. You will be much like a woman who conceives a beautiful baby and then neglects herself and ultimately miscarries. Yes, my children, it is possible to receive many graces and then through neglect to lose each and every one of them. And so, as this year begins, I urge you to choose prayer as a way of life, prioritize your souls and your spiritual growth, and the graces which you have received over this Christmas period will grow and multiply. Look to my mother and your mother to guide you. Wow, 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 wow. How more simple in a way could it be? Imagine at Christmas time, we invited the baby Jesus, into our souls, and this little baby Jesus has to grow in our lives. But the only way that he can grow in our lives is just like having a physical baby. It's through food. The food is prayer. It's also through spending time with him, through holding him. We do that often through adoration. Also by doing things like going to Mass, because Mass, of course, is the ultimate form of prayer when we receive Jesus into our souls. And if you like, it's like giving the baby a super tonic, so to speak, of graces. And of course, as well, if we do make a mistake, turning back, going to confession, wiping it off, and continuing on. And so Jesus is saying that he desperately wants us to grow in the spiritual life. But just like having a baby in the physical world, in order to grow in the spiritual life, it does require changes in one's life. You can't be doing everything because it requires time. You might have to get up earlier in the morning. If, for example, you decide to go to Mass every day or more regularly, then you might not be able to do some other activity. If it's at lunchtime, for example, or whatever else. If you decide to go to Medjugorje or somewhere on a spiritual retreat for a couple of weeks, well, then you might have to say goodbye to your holiday in Mallorca or whatever. So there are sacrifices. The same thing if you make a commitment to doing a certain amount of Eucharistic adoration every week, well, then you might have to say to your friends on a certain night, well, no, I'm not able to make Wednesday night bingo, or I'm not able to do such and such a thing. Also, of course, some people might laugh at you. They might think you're wasting your time or whatever, you're gone too holy, so you may be teased a little bit. And these are all the type of sacrifices. And people get it when they have babies nowadays. People get it for all sorts of reasons. But Jesus is saying that when you love greatly, you don't see it as a sacrifice. And you see that sometimes I see people and they were very worldly, for example, and then all of a sudden they had a baby, and now that they had a baby, they settle down and they become the most regular sort of ordinary parents in a sort of a way, everything that they weren't before. And if you ask them, do they miss traveling or do they miss all these things? They seem to say no because they have this new baby and the baby is so beautiful. Now all of a sudden all they're caring about is where to bring the baby to school and what to do and how the baby is growing, and they turn into, in some ways they turn into super moms in a kind of a way. And so Jesus is saying the same thing. Jesus is the pearl of great price. And the more we encounter the true living Jesus, the more we'll give. And I remember that, for example, my own conversion story. I had an experience of Jesus 15 years ago, and the experience was so strong that on the spot I ended up giving up a job as an actuary, which was an extremely well paid job. I ended up going overseas, trusting Jesus and Providence, and giving my whole entire life to following Jesus because I could see that it was the most important thing in the world, and it made no sense to me to do anything else with my life, only to give my life fully to Him. But on the other hand, I had to get what you'd call a whopper grace in order to do that. So I can't take credit for that. I was given this special grace, and the greater the grace, so to speak, the greater our response to the grace is. And so that's why we can be praying to Jesus to increase the grace in our lives, and that, of course, can happen through prayer. And now Jesus does go on, of course, to say, which is kind of sad. He said, "Yet, my children, many of you will not make these sacrifices and will not change your lives in the necessary way for your spiritual soul." And so what he's saying is there are many people, of course, like a New Year's resolution, that will say, next year I'm going to be more holy, next year I want to be more prayerful, but then next year comes and it just doesn't happen. They're not able to make the sacrifices. They're not able to make any changes, and as a result, nothing happens. And then Jesus goes on to say something which in a way is sort of shocking and yet true. He said, "You'll be much like a woman who conceives a beautiful baby and then neglects herself and ultimately miscarries. Yes, my children, it is possible to receive many graces and then through neglect to lose each and every one of them." And that is quite a shocking thing to say, and yet from a experiential and practical point of view, everybody pretty knows it's true. You could receive lots of graces, make lots of promises, and then a week later basically turn your whole back on the lot of it. And we've seen that because often many of us know people maybe that were very prayerful once upon a time, then something happens, they turn their back on the church, and basically it just all seems to go. And in a way, it's not much different to being at the gym. You could go to the gym seriously for a month, you could change your food, and you could lose quite a bit of weight, you could get quite in shape, and then, I don't know, maybe a month later you decide to give it up, and 3 months later you're bigger and fatter than ever, and more out of shape than you ever were. And so that's the thing about grace, and that's the thing about the baby Jesus. The baby Jesus, Jesus in our lives is a person. If he's not growing, he's shrinking. And we don't want those graces to shrink, but then in order for them to grow, we need to invest our time, our sacrifices, our decisions, and our priorities actually into growing spiritually and into following Jesus. And so, as the year begins, I urge you to choose prayer as a way of life. Prioritize your soul and spiritual growth, and the graces which you have received over this Christmas period will grow and grow and multiply. So Jesus is urging us, he's saying you've received many graces. His desire is for the graces to grow. It's for our good, it's for the good of the church, it's for good of evangelization, it's for everyone's good. And so he's urging us for the graces to grow. He's saying that the spiritual graces, these eternal graces, that they're of such importance that if we really knew their importance, we'd realize that nothing that this physical world has to offer is comes close. And so he's urging us to put our spiritual lives first, to put him first, so that the graces we received over Christmas will grow and grow and grow and multiply, so that we can be full of graces. And then he says, "Look to my mother and your mother to guide you." So Our Lady is always there. She's our mother, and like in Medjugorje, she's always guiding us through prayer. Prayer from the heart, regular prayer, fasting, adoration, reading the Bible, forgiveness, love, healing of the heart. So she's always saying the same thing because it hasn't changed. It's all actually quite simple in a way, it's just to apply it. And so, what better New Year's resolution could we make than to basically give our lives to Jesus and to step out in faith and to give our lives to growing spiritually. And if we do make a mistake or whatever, not to just throw in the towel and say, well, that's it, there's no point in trying anymore now. I've broken my New Year's resolution. It's already the 2nd of January. What's the point? I'll try again in 2025. No, keep on going. Keep on persevering. Keep on asking for graces. Keep on going to confession. Keep on seeking the spiritual life, knowing that ultimately it is the only thing that has any real significance, importance. And when we die, it's the only thing, the spiritual graces, the little Jesus, if you like, in us, that has hopefully grown up into an adult. That is the only thing that when we die, we will bring with us to heaven. And so, if we were really smart, we would say, well, if that's the meaning of life, I have to prioritize that because that is the purpose, that is the goal, and everything else has a place, but the first place goes to Jesus. So, on that note, have a holy, prayerful, spiritual, I hope, new year of transformation, of holiness, and of all the spiritual joy and spiritual adventures that come with that. God bless you all.